Why did you talk about difficult times ahead? Are we not past the worst?
No, I don't think we are. I'm afraid I think the worst is still to come. We are only just starting the period of, well, zero growth in terms of overall funding, but really negative growth if you take health service inflation into account. And particularly following on from not quite years of plenty, but years of quite sustained and quite significant growth, I think that's going to be very, very difficult for the NHS to cope with, given the rising pressure there is on its demands.
You talked about a recent, genuine period of engagement with the government after a prolonged period of stonewalling. Tell us about that comment.
Well, I think, we had the announcement of the white paper in the summer. Then we had the so-called consultation period, which we put a huge amount of effort in, not just us, lots of others too, and really nothing happened. And in fact, even worse than that, when the bill was published, it seemed even worse than was being outlined in the white paper. And again, there was little reaction for 2 or 3 months, despite increased pressure. And it was really only when things got to a crescendo, following our special conference, the Lib Dems had their spring meeting, that the pressure on government meant that they had to do something, and we had the listening exercise. And I think there was a genuine attempt there. I mean, I had more people phoning me up in those few weeks than I'd had in the previous 2 years, wanting to speak, wanting to hear our opinions, and it seemed genuinely wanting to listen. Not just in a sense that, oh yes, we'll do everything you want, we'll do everything you say, but at least listening to the reasons behind why we felt that things were unsatisfactory and things needed to change.
So from your perspective, has the listening exercise been valuable?
I think it's been valuable as a process, although it would have been far more valuable if it had been done at the beginning, and that's something ever since I've been chairman I've been asking for. I'm not saying that doctors or the BMA has a special right to determine government policy, but I think because we do represent the widest range of doctors in the UK and the largest number of doctors in the UK, that we should be given an opportunity to comment on proposed changes to the way the NHS is run, the impact it has on doctors and on patients at the earliest opportunity, not late in the day when already we are seeing the problems of some of the government's proposals in terms of PCT destabilisation, other funding pressures beginning to bite.
So what did you think of the government's response?
Well, it's been a bit of a mixed response. In one sense, they said that they were going to adopt virtually all of the Future Forum's recommendations. But then, speaking to other audiences, we've heard, competition is still alive, don't worry. So, and we've only just, in the last 3 days, had the 180 amendments, and we understand there are more to follow. So we've been doing a very rapid exercise of going through these to see whether they actually do what the government said they would do. And again, it seemed to be a bit of a mixed bag. Certainly some of the things have been a significant improvement. There are other areas, though, where there is either doubt or actually very little has happened.
There is always talk at these conferences of job cuts, of cuts in services, but do you think there is a feeling this year that it is worse than ever?
Well, what I was trying to say in my speech is there doesn't need to be significant job cuts. As we said earlier, the money in the NHS, apparently, if we are to believe the politicians, is still there. What they are saying, it may have to be moved around to cope with the increasing workload in other areas. What I've argued for a long time is there's a much better narrative, both nationally and locally, about where some services may be reined back a bit, but where other services will be developed. So that actually, hopefully with sufficient flexibility in the job market, that actually people can move. They may have to move slightly or do their work in a slightly different environment. But there shouldn't be any need for large-scale job cuts or redundancies.
So in the present climate, everyone is concerned about their income and the way that they're living and also the general picture. But are you concerned that the talk of doctors' pensions is going to damage the patient-doctor relationship and that people will misperceive that as you looking after your own?
Well, I certainly was highlighting the strength of trust that there is by the public for doctors, and that has remained constant, and we're still the most trusted profession. And we wouldn't want to do anything to damage that trust. Equally, there is, a real battle on public sector, and particularly NHS pensions. And we very responsibly went through a major review of pensions just 3 years ago. Lots of changes to the scheme, increasing the retirement age for new members, increasing the amount of contributions that doctors and other health service employees make, capping the taxpayers, the employers' contributions. And actually, the NHS scheme is in surplus at the moment and will be so, generating about £10 billion over the next 4 or 5 years. So we don't see the need for further attacks, which are essentially just a tax on public service workers. It's not absolutely necessary to fund their pensions to make these changes. And so we don't see that need, and we will be opposing unrealistic changes that just seem to be taxing them for the sake of it. And of course, I would add, this is on top of senior doctors now in the second of 3 years of pay freeze. For GPs, they've seen their expenses go up and their incomes go down. And for all doctors, they've seen various attacks. Medical students have seen the rise in student fees. So we are more than doing our bit to cope or help the country cope with the economic situation, and we won't be sort of unfairly picked upon.
Dr. Hamish Meldrum, thank you.